I used to think fate had a sick sense of humor. The day I got pulled off crop rotation duty for special ops felt like the punchline. It turns out, fighting an intergalactic war is no laughing matter. Here I was, Private Lennox, farm boy turned grunt, about to blast off into a universe I barely understood. We all got the basic rundown. Aliens, they called them the Xyla, stumbled on Earth by accident. Some diplomatic snafu followed, blaster fire replaced handshakes, then boom, we were at war. They had the tech, ships cutting through space like knives through butter, energy shields that laughed at our puny missiles, even boots that let those spindly freaks walk on air. Turns out, the only thing holding us back was fantasizing about them having the decency to fight on the ground like everybody else. Well, lesson learned. My first year of service was spent mostly underground, a glorified gopher in an oversized bunker. Command called them strategic centers. I called them glorified bunkers. When you spend 18 hours a day staring at grainy monitor feeds and outdated planetary maps, the romance of being a war hero withers real quick. See, the Xyla made it clear, they wanted Earth, but they didn't care much for the Earthlings on it. Their ships hung in the upper atmosphere, raining down orbital strikes on any major city, base, or anything resembling industry. Our glorious military response was basically playing the world's grimmest game of whack-a-mole. Then came my big break. I wasn't even supposed to be on comm duty that night. Jenkins called in with some stomach bug and I got shuffled onto his shift. That's the thing about fate, sometimes the hand it deals you is so crappy your only option is to fold and hope you get a better one next round. Turns out, not every human higher-up was ready to wave the white flag. There were whispers of skunkworks projects, black budgets, scientists so crazy they made Oppenheimer look like a Sunday school teacher. But mostly it was just rumors, that desperate hope you cling to in the bunker when the walls feel like they're closing in. I was halfway through my 17th cup of recycled coffee substitute when the call came in. Scramble alert. Priority 1. My ears perked up, heart rattling in my damn ribcage. We hadn't gotten one of those since. Well, ever. Not that I knew what it meant, exactly. I patched the transmission through, and General What's-His-Face popped up on the screen. Old guy, seen more boardroom battles than actual ones, I bet. But his voice was sharp enough to cut through the recycled air. Private Lennox, he barked, I'm told you got the sharpest eyes in the bunker. I swallowed, some combination of the bad coffee and nerves knotting my stomach. Sir, I can spot a Xyla cruiser from low orbit on a cloudy day. Wasn't bragging. Farmland stretches for miles, makes you develop an eye for detail. Not that detail was helping me much watching pixelated blobs fight on a screen. The general grunted, something almost like approval flickering over his face. Good. Because I need you to spot me something else. Something that should not be there. The screen blinked, and a live feed replaced the usual tactical map. My eyes narrowed. It looked like aerial footage, coastline, dense forest. Normal Earth stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. Scan west-southwest sector, the general ordered, his voice tight. Slow and methodical. You see anything airborne that we didn't put there, you alert me immediately. I did as told. Now, mind you, this was old-school eyeball sweep, none of the fancy targeting software. Took me a solid minute to get my bearings. Then I saw it. A flicker in the corner of my eye, gone before I could focus properly. I rewound the feed, zoomed in. There. For maybe half a second, a silhouette broke the tree line. Not a bird, not a drone, nothing I'd ever seen before. Triangular, smooth as glass, and moving too damn fast for anything with propellers. My hands went cold. Sir, I managed to croak. I think I've got something. The feed cut to a close-up, the unknown craft now impossible to miss. It was sleek, a predator in the sky, matte black and defying gravity with its sharp angles. My mouth hung open. This thing wasn't just defying the laws of physics, it was spitting on them. Is that one of ours, sir? It came out half whisper, half strangled gasp. I didn't even know we could build anything like that. Heck, I didn't think it was possible to build something like that. General What's-His-Face cracked the ghost of a smile, some of the grimness melting from his face. Son, let me be the first to welcome you to the weird part of the war. Turns out, while a chunk of humanity was cowering underground, there was another chunk beavering away in secret labs. This wasn't just an aircraft, it was a defiance made manifest. It was every wild-eyed conspiracy theory about Area 51 come to life, only better. The general started filling me in. Stealth fighters, top secret, still in the prototype stage, and the whole reason behind our Priority 1 scramble. Word came down from the very top. We were gonna take these birds out for a spin, and I was their eye in the sky. See, the Xyla got cocky. They thought we were a beaten race, that wiping out our surface presence would break our spirit. They didn't count on us having a few tricks stashed up our sleeves. The plan was unhinged, the kind that'd get you court-martialed in peacetime. But desperate times, and all that. I spent the next few hours, an adrenaline-soaked blur, feeding coordinates to a squadron of pilots who were probably clinically insane. Our stealth boys weren't made for long-range combat, no fancy missile arrays, just high-powered lasers on a razor's edge chassis. It meant getting so close to a Xyla cruiser you could practically smell the alien equivalent of burnt toast before you fired. Comm chatter was a symphony of nerves and exhilaration. Static-laced voices of the pilots, call signs Ghost 1, Ghost 2, Ghost 3. They sounded on the edge of either heroism or breaking. My voice, guiding them like some twisted air traffic controller, was surprisingly steady. Farm life, turns out, is good prep for handling the unimaginable. When Ghost 1 made his first pass, it was over before I could blink. A flash of light across the underbelly of a Xyla destroyer, followed by a delayed boom that rattled even my subterranean comm station. I whooped loud enough to catch the general's scowl, but damn it, we did it. Just like that, a ship that had been an untouchable menace was spiraling towards the ocean, trailing smoke. What followed was barely a battle, more like a meticulously planned act of cosmic payback. The Xyla never even saw us coming. Ghosts materialized out of thin air, lasers sliced into their shields, and those untouchable ships started dropping like overripe fruit. News of our unexpected victory crackled through the bunker like an electric shock. The guys I spent endless hours with, grimy and slumped with defeat, were now buzzing. Every face I passed held a flicker of a forgotten feeling, hope. Sure, we hadn't won the war yet, but we bought ourselves something far more precious, time. I should have been right amongst them, celebrating. Instead, Command decided I was too darn good with a long-range eyeball to waste. They hooked me up with a team prepping for another Ghost run, this time with an onboard observer twist. Apparently, having a farm boy squinting at screens translated perfectly to backseat piloting in cutting-edge experimental aircraft. Turns out, onboard observer was a fancy title for glorified human cargo. I got crammed into a modified two-seater with barely enough legroom to house a grumpy cat. The pilot, Captain Beckett, was everything you'd expect from a steely-eyed ace, buzz-cut, square jaw, and the kind of thousand-yard stare that said hello to more things she'd rather forget than she cared to remember. Our flight briefing felt less like a plan and more like a fever dream. We were pushing the stealth fighters beyond anything the test jockeys had dared. Not a quick hit and run this time, but a full-blown infiltration of the Xyla mothership. The word reconnaissance was thrown around a lot, but mainly it sounded like we were gonna fly right into the belly of the beast and poke around until somebody got mad. Takeoff was a punch to the gut. The G-forces turned my insides into jelly, and the recycled air tasted of copper panic. When my vision cleared, we were slicing through the atmosphere so fast the stars blurred into streaks. I realized with a jolt that this was it, my very first time off this miserable rock called Earth. Most people dream about that moment their whole lives. My view was the inside of a cramped cockpit and the back of Captain Beckett's helmet. The comm crackled to life. Ground control was a distant hum now, replaced by Beckett's clipped commands as we neared the Xyla fleet. The mothership loomed over its destroyers like an angry god, a monstrous slab of metal bristling with weaponry. My stomach did backflips just looking at the damn thing. Remember, Lennox, Beckett's voice cut through my fear-induced haze, they can't see us. Only way they know we're here is if you screw up. No pressure, then. My eyes were glued to every scope and monitor that crammed the small space. Sensor readings danced before my eyes, shield integrity, targeting systems, troop movement, a relentless stream of information about an enemy I barely understood. It was enough to make your brain leak out your ears. We ghosted past the destroyer picket like they were standing still. The stealth tech, whatever those lab geniuses cooked up, worked flawlessly. The Xyla were flying blind, and the thrill of it sent a shiver down my spine. We were an invisible blade, slipping into the heart of their armada. The mothership's docking bay swallowed us with a groan of protesting metal. Beckett cut the engines, and an eerie silence descended. For the first time in hours, the only thing I heard was my own ragged breath, echoing in the confined space. I was half convinced the whole mission was an elaborate joke before the canopy slid back, and I got my first good look inside the ship that had haunted our nightmares. It was unlike anything I could have imagined. Not sleek and shiny, but a warren of exposed pipes, conduits sparking with alien energy, patches of metal more rust than hull. If the outside screamed intimidation, the inside felt desperate, like a hastily thrown together fortress of scavenged tech. A guttural screech echoed through the corridors, and my blood ran cold. Beckett pressed a finger to her earpiece. Ground control confirms, multiple lifeforms detected. Looks like the rumor mill was right. The rumor mill. That swirling mess of hearsay about the Xyla not being the sole masters of their own tech. Turns out, while we huddled underground, some brainiacs were analyzing Xyla scraps. Their conclusion was grim: these aliens weren't conquerors, but scavengers, cobbled together from warring species forced into a desperate alliance. Our victory back on Earth wasn't just about fancy planes, but about exposing the cracks in our enemy's foundation. Lennox, stick with me, Beckett's voice broke into my thoughts, and try not to get yourself shot. Optimism wasn't exactly her strong suit. We moved through the shadows, blasters at the ready. Each metallic clang, each flicker of alien light had me jumping out of my skin. Turns out, being a backseat pilot was every bit as nerve-wracking as watching from a bunker. The Xyla we encountered were a motley crew. Some spindly, hunched over glowing consoles, others hulking brutes in mismatched armor, shouting orders in languages that grated on human ears. Every corner held proof that this wasn't some unstoppable conquering force, but a slapped-together war machine running on fumes and fear. The deeper we went, the more obvious it became. Control panels were a hodgepodge of mismatched tech, some flashing with damage warnings. Blast doors hung half-melted, evidence of internal skirmishes. These guys weren't just losing the fight against us, they were losing against themselves. It was then, hunkered down behind a crackling generator, that it hit me. We weren't just inside their ship, we were inside their heads. The Xyla weren't the unified, terrifying force we painted them to be. They were scared, desperate, every bit as fragile as we always had been. Beckett tapped my shoulder, pointing to a sealed metal door. Ground control says that's where we'll find their command center. Their entire leadership, ripe for the taking. I swallowed, the taste of copper fear sharp in my mouth. Capturing their command center. It meant more than a single battle, it meant shifting the tides of the entire war. She turned to me then, and I swore I saw a flicker of something like respect in those hard eyes. Ready to make history, Lennox? Ready as I'll ever be, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. The plan was simple and stupid in equal measure. Beckett would cause a distraction, and I'd slip inside during the chaos. It was, essentially, a glorified smash and grab, with me as the very smashable prize. Beckett kicked things off with a flash grenade that lit up the corridor like an angry little sun. Screeches and shouts erupted as the disoriented Xyla stumbled around. I used the moment, weaving through the blinding light, heart pounding a drumroll against my ribs. The door loomed ahead, an unassuming rectangle of dull metal that separated us from potential victory. I slammed my shoulder against it, once, twice, and finally the ancient hinges gave way with a groan. Inside was every bit as chaotic as I expected. Xyla officers, a tangled mess of limbs, fur, and scales, shouted conflicting orders over a console that flickered and sparked with distress warnings. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, snagging the data recorder, a fist-sized chunk of tech that supposedly held the crown jewels of Xyla intelligence. It felt warm in my hands, humming with alien energy. This tiny thing represented more than firepower or tactics, it was their secrets, their vulnerabilities, laid bare. Alarms screeched a symphony of panic as I scrambled back out into the corridor. Beckett was a force of nature, blaster barking, creating a whirlwind of distraction. My escape route was a blur, dodging blaster fire, shoving past disoriented Xyla, fear and adrenaline propelling me more than any tactical training. The docking bay came into view, and my heart did a hopeful flip. We were almost out of this. The stealth fighter, our chariot of escape, gleamed with the promise of safety. Then something slammed me to the floor with bone-jarring force, the world erupting in white-hot pain. My vision swam, nausea twisting my stomach. Through the haze, I made out a hulking figure straddling me, the stench of its breath burning my nostrils. One of the Xyla brutes, its eyes bulging with a terrifying mixture of rage and confusion. It roared something unintelligible, spittle flecking its jagged teeth. My fingers scrabbled uselessly against its plated armor, seeking purchase, a weapon, anything. The data recorder, my prize, had skittered out of reach, glinting mockingly in a pool of artificial light. A shadow fell over us. I watched, with a chilling detachment, as Beckett stalked towards my attacker with the cold precision of a machine. I'd heard blaster fire, but in the symphony of chaos it barely registered. The hulking Xyla sagged against me, choking on a wet gurgle. Then it collapsed, a heap of lifeless armor. "Get up, soldier," Beckett's barked command cut through my daze. She hauled me to my feet with surprising strength. I stumbled, my injured side throbbing with an intensity that promised a spectacular array of bruises later. I didn't have time to self-assess. We were running again. The stealth fighter was our salvation. We piled in, the automatic canopy slamming shut as the docking bay erupted in panic blaster fire. Beckett gunned the engines, and the world tilted crazily as we tore out of the mothership's belly, back into the black embrace of space. Behind us, the mighty Xyla flagship flickered, bursts of malfunctioning energy rippling across its hull. Word had spread, we not only breached their defenses but stole their precious secrets. The Xyla Armada, once a symbol of our destruction, turned sluggish and uncoordinated, ships scattering in a panic I'd never thought possible. The comm crackled with jubilant chatter. Our little mission, born of desperation and wild-eyed science, had broken the Xyla spirit. Turns out, their greatest weakness wasn't shield strength or firepower, it was the fragile threads holding their alliance together. Back on Earth, my legs nearly gave out as applause and cheers washed over me. I was a hero now, decorated and paraded in front of news cameras. Generals I'd never met shook my hand, and politicians droned on about the indomitable spirit of humanity. All I could think of was the smell of copper and the warmth of alien tech humming in my bruised ribs. My fame was fleeting. War isn't kind to its heroes. They sent me back to the front lines, armed with not only advanced intel but also with a lingering dread. We had rattled the Xyla, exposed the fault lines in their stolen empire. But any cornered animal is its most dangerous. News reached the bunkers in frantic whispers. The Xyla were regrouping somewhere in the furthest stretches of the solar system. There, amidst the gas giants and icy moons, they were constructing a new base, a hidden fortress from which to strike back. They were learning, adapting. I volunteered for the mission without hesitation. It was partly duty, partly stubbornness, but mostly it was that persistent fear gnawing at me. The mission briefing laid it out bare: find the Xyla base. Gauge its defenses. Then get the hell out. This time, no fancy fighters, just a modified long-range shuttle, anonymity being our greatest weapon. We hugged the shadows of Jupiter during our approach, praying that the gas giant's radiation would mask our signature. Sensors flickered manically, feeding me a terrifying glimpse of the Xyla's desperation. Their base wasn't hidden in the rings of Saturn or behind a dwarf planet as we suspected, but tethered precariously to a dying moon. It was an act of brazen defiance, a middle finger to the laws of physics as much as to us. The closer we got, the worse it looked. The moon's surface was a patchwork of stolen technology. Shipyards churned out new fighters, sleeker, armed to the teeth, while energy shields pulsed around a central command structure that bristled with enough weaponry to wipe out half the solar system. What terrified me most wasn't their firepower, but their unity. The scavenged tech was now integrated, the frantic patch-up jobs replaced with chilling efficiency. They had seen the blueprints of their own destruction and rebuilt themselves stronger. We hadn't just exposed their weaknesses, we had taught them to overcome them. I snapped image after image, feeding intel back to Earth. Each data packet was part battle plan, part death warrant. The Xyla weren't just preparing for war, they were preparing for vengeance. My hand hovered over the transmit button, and I hesitated. There was a final piece of information to send, the most vital one. It wasn't targeting coordinates or troop counts I typed out, but a simple message, the only way I knew to make them understand the terrible resolve of a species they had foolishly underestimated. We're coming for you. We retreated with the ghost of Jupiter burning in our rearview, the relentless pulse of enemy scanners fading with agonizing slowness. Escape didn't taste like victory, but like the bitter tang of borrowed time. Back on Earth, my recon data went off like a bomb. The bunker I once knew as a den of forced optimism morphed into a buzzing war room. But this wasn't a buzz of newfound hope, it was the desperate hum of a machine gearing up for a fight it might not survive. See, the Xyla weren't just building an army, they were evolving. The sloppy patchwork of their early tech was gone. Their ships, their weapons. Hell, even their communications were bleeding edge, not stolen tech, but their own. They turned our victory into a blueprint for their rapid, terrifying metamorphosis. Suddenly, those fancy stealth fighters felt a whole lot less intimidating. Command scrambled, geniuses burning the midnight oil to counter this new threat. The race wasn't for a tactical edge anymore. It was for survival. They sent me back out, time and again. No more backseat piloting, just gritty, long-haul infiltration runs. I learned the rhythms of Xyla space, the hum of their shield frequencies, the cold calculations written across their sprawling shipyards. We were David to their rapidly evolving Goliath, chucking stones and hoping for a lucky strike. Sleep became a stranger. I'd jolt awake, heart pounding as if chased by unseen Xyla beasts. Turns out, adrenaline fatigue doesn't mix well with piloting cramped shuttles through asteroid fields. More than once, I woke up with my heart in my throat and my hands locked on phantom controls, the emptiness of space an ever-present echo of my own mortality. They slapped me with a shrink after I nearly took off with the refueling nozzle still attached. The guy was all soft smiles and concerned frowns, trying to pry open the places in my head I'd meticulously boarded up. Trauma, he'd say, voice heavy with shrink speak, is like an untended wound. It festers. My untended wound was the relentless advancement on my targeting screens. I'd seen the Xyla go from disorganized scavengers to a terrifyingly synchronized force. Our intel was top-notch, but it was always a step behind, a desperate attempt to decipher an enemy that always seemed to outsmart us. Then came the whisper of their superweapon. Not gleaned from grainy images or intercepted transmissions, but carried on the lips of captured soldiers and terrified deserters. It was more than a doomsday device, it was a philosophy made manifest. The unmaking, they called it. Every fiber of my farm boy soul rebelled against the sheer wrongness of that word. The briefings became grim rituals. Generals with haunted eyes laid out plans born out of desperation. There was talk of preemptive strikes, of targeting their new base, of taking the fight back to them before it was too late. The Xyla, once a faceless enemy, now had a terrifying shape, the shape of our own extinction. The night before the mission, I found myself on the bunker roof, a place I normally avoided. Too much open sky, too much reminder of the monstrous battle being waged above our heads. But tonight, I needed the stars. They seemed so cold, so distant from our petty wars and apocalyptic ambitions. Up there, the Xyla weren't an invading horde, just one more species clinging to life in a vast, uncaring universe. And down here, we weren't heroes or saviors, just scared little apes, swinging a stick at a cosmic wildfire. Word had come down, our mission was greenlit. One last-ditch recon run, directly into the heart of their base, the eye of the storm. Target the unmaking, whatever the hell it was. Then pray Earth could pull something out of their sleeve to stop it. My hands shook as I buckled into a shuttle so crammed with surveillance gear I could barely breathe. This wasn't about intel anymore, it was about buying time, every miserable second of it. The flight was a blur of maneuvering, of holding my breath at every flicker of an enemy sensor, of the silent screams echoing in my own head. I'd run this route a dozen times, but this time the stakes were agonizingly clear. Fail, and the Xyla weren't just winning, they were erasing us. Their base hung in front of me, an obscenity against the backdrop of 1,000 dying stars. It thrummed with a terrifying energy I could feel even through the insulated shuttle hull. I breached the perimeter not with clever maneuvers or stealth tech, but with the kind of cold terror that makes you reckless. Inside was a controlled chaos. Xyla warriors moved with a determination I'd never witnessed, a horrifying unity of purpose. Their command centers vibrated with the strain of managing vast deployments. My targeting systems went haywire, trying to decipher it all: shipyards, weapons arrays, communication networks. And at its very core, a pulse unlike anything I'd ever encountered. The unmaking had a heartbeat. I snapped image after frantic image, knowing full well each second brought me closer to discovery, to capture, to. Worse. I wasn't a hero. Not really. I was just stubborn. Stubborn enough to not go down without making those Xyla bastards pay for every bruise, every sleepless night, every damn star that blinked out because of their war. Then the alarms shrieked. My breath hitched. I was compromised. The Xyla knew. A squadron of those new, horrifyingly sleek fighters tore through the corridors towards me. Escape wasn't an option, not anymore. Instead, I turned my shuttle on a crash course directly into the heart of the pulse, the epicenter of this monstrous unmaking. My last transmission wasn't intel, wasn't fear, it was a battle cry. Not the polished slogans they put on propaganda posters, but a raw, guttural roar of defiance, a desperate plea for the unpredictable miracle we humans cling to when the odds become a tombstone. I hit the core of the unmaking and the world dissolved into light and sound. Sirens merged with my own screams. The shuttle buckled and warped, a tin can against a god's wrath. Then, with an abruptness that made my teeth ache, silence. I don't know how long I floated there, a speck of defiant humanity amidst the wreckage of our cosmic grudge match. Could have been seconds, could have been forever. Then the comm crackled. Not with the harsh sounds of the Xyla, but the frantic voices of my own kind. Lennox, do you copy? Lennox, respond. My fingers fumbled for the controls, my voice raw when it finally emerged. This is Lennox. I think I'm still here. Shears erupted, frantic with relief and laced with a desperate edge. I didn't done it. Whatever the unmaking was, it wasn't anymore. My battered shuttle was hauled back, not as a trophy, but as a priceless blueprint. I was debriefed, poked, prodded, then shipped off to the shrink again. The nightmares didn't fade, but they changed. In my darkest dreams, I wasn't being hunted anymore, I was doing the hunting. The war didn't end that day, but it shifted. The Xyla, thrown into chaos by the destruction of their greatest weapon, stumbled. Earth, that stubborn little speck in the universe, rallied. Because sometimes, victory isn't about crushing your enemy. Sometimes, it's as simple, and as impossibly hard, as outlasting them. The scars, physical and the kind that haunt your soul, never really vanished. I was paraded around less, shoved back into the gritty work of a war that was far from over. The Xyla may have been rattled, but they were a wounded beast, and those always fight the dirtiest. Every mission felt like a coin toss, every patrol buzzing with the knowledge that somewhere out there, humanity's borrowed time might finally be running out. But in the quiet moments, when the stars above didn't feel like judgment but like distant friends, I'd think back to my moment in the belly of the unmaking. And I knew, whether through sheer dumb luck or some cosmic twist of fate, the day might come when I'd get to stare down the Xyla again, not in terror, not in defeat, but with the quiet, determined fury of a species that had faced down oblivion. And won.